All right, so thank you again for inviting me. This is going to be a brief, hopefully, story of what I've been through, and I want to follow this outline as much possible. But again, you can always, ask questions in between and all. But I just want to start with, my background first, just to give you a little more thought on me so that you can have more informed questions maybe in the process. And then, of course, at the gist of this conversation, unfortunately, it's going to be the coup attempt in 2016 and how it actually changed a whole country along with my family's lives. And then the new beginning in the US, what it looked like for us, what were the decision processes that we went through, and then how I ended up as the chairman of the NATO Veterans Initiative, a new initiative, and what this all means for me and my family, and what are some things that we may maybe together learn from my own experience. So those are going to be the points that I want to cover with you all. Again, Jody, thank you for the invitation. I know it's been quite long that you have invited me to this forum. When you first mentioned, I was so scared, honestly, to be talking about my experience in such a esteemed forum. And you mentioned that you can apply for a lesson, and I was thinking like lesson, me a lesson to Chesapeake Forum. So I just couldn't get myself do it first year, but then second year I got more courage, I should say, after talking to you at our sales reception, and then I applied for the lesson. But again, it's I don't see it as a lesson. This is just a chat between you and me. To me personally, really, I come from a cultural background which we really do not. It's shameful for us, for me personally, the family that I come from, to talk about myself. It's just it's pretty much very same maybe to a lot of other cultures, but that's how I feel actually talking about my own experiences. So to me, this is just another story with a major life event, but I don't know how it's going to resonate with you, and I'm hoping that you're going to find it somehow useful, and you're going to not regret the time you're spending with me today on this beautiful day. So I'd like to start with introducing my family. So my wife, Suna, we've been married since 2000, and right now she is a cybersecurity analyst. Actually, the most success story here is hers, and I will mention why that's the case in my remarks to you. But she's done great in this past 8 years. My son Burak is right now 23 years old and just graduated, just got his first job, and I will talk about his experience as well. And my daughter Elif Ece, she is graduating this May, and she is also a stunning young woman, hopefully coming into the law force, judicial force. And I'm going to talk about her a lot as well. So that's my family. And essentially, again, why I'm here is because from a decorated Army Colonel in the Turkish Armed Forces, then to a NATO military diplomat, and then suddenly to nothing. That is what my life was reduced to in 2016. And as I was, preparing myself for this talk, I came across this nice saying from Charles Swindoll: life is 10% what happens to you, but then 90% is how you react to it. I want you to be the judge of that. So today I'm going to be putting forth honestly what I've and my family have gone through, and I'm hoping that we were able to actually react to it in a positive way. It all started with 2016. So until 2016, I had a very regular life. As an army officer, I was a decorated army officer in the Turkish Armed Forces. I was a privileged army officer, being a West Point graduate in the Turkish Armed Forces. Just being one of the 15 West Point graduates in the Turkish Armed Forces meant something to many people. And but in 2016, with this event, unfortunately, things changed quite a bit. So I'm going to talk about the coup attempt in detail in the coming slides, but essentially there was a failed coup attempt. There's still a lot of controversy on the event itself. I will share my opinions on the event as well as we move on. But I just want to give you some perspective of how big of an event this was for the Turkish Armed Forces, but also Turkish society at large. So after the failed coup attempt, there were 24,706 military personnel purged from the armed forces ranks. 33% of all officers were gone. 84% of all staff officers who are graduates of Army War College in Istanbul, after it's a 2-year intense program, it's a master's degree of the Turkish Armed Forces, and 84, I'm part of that group. I'm a staff officer. I was a staff officer. So 84% of all of that was gone. Almost half, 49% of all general officers were gone. And after all 8 years, the judicial processes to this day, pretty much everything is now settled, and there has been about 4,891 prison sentences given to military personnel, and of which 3,000 are for life. So the people are still serving life sentences, 3,000 ex-former military personnel. And overall, this wasn't just, even though this was a coup attempt, a failed coup attempt, it didn't end with the military bureaucracy, the civilian bureaucracy, and even the society itself was affected, impacted by the results, the outcomes of this huge event. So we know from the government offices that 705,172 arrests or investigations have been made in this 8-year period. There has been over 125,000 prison sentences. And when you think about the families of these people, at least 2.5 million Turkish citizens were impacted or influenced by the events of 2016. Essentially, they've gone through a terror investigation, as we're going to talk later on. So it was a big event, and during this big event, I was at a safe location. I was in Brussels. I was working at my NATO headquarters post at the International Military Staff Operations Division. So I was miles and miles away, thousands of miles away from the event in Turkey. I have witnessed nothing at my, post, and it was a Friday night. I was having dinner with my family. So you may think that, hey, what other alibi would you need? You may, question that, but it didn't work out that way. About 2 months later, first in August 30th, I got promoted to colonel, interestingly, and then 1 month later, they purged me and they ordered me back to Turkey in 3 days. So that was a big moment in our lives, and we had to determine what we were going to do. And one of the things that I remember reading during those days is this great saying from our great leader Atatürk: "In a country without liberty, there is death and destruction. Freedom is the mother of all progress and salvation." So I'm going to tell you that story. And I want to start, of course, with my background first, a brief background. I am from a small town from Central East Turkey, Elazığ, and I was born in 1974. And I was selected to Anatolian Middle School, which is a separate public school, which actually teaches better English So I got introduced to English at early ages. I was lucky to be able to do that. And then I was interested in military because my brother was at the academy getting a degree for becoming a medical doctor, and that made me interested in military high school. So we do have military high schools in Turkey, by the way. So I applied and I got admitted to Maltepe Military High School in Izmir. So for me, at the age of 14, moving from Elazığ, a small Central East Turkish town, to Izmir was a huge move. And this was my first move towards the West. And that continued with my admission to West Point. We're going to come to that in a second. At Izmir, at military high school, I was successful, quite successful. I was the valedictorian. And when I got close to my senior year, at the end of my junior year, I was approached by my superiors and I was asked, would you be interested at going in West Point? I said, what is West Point? I had no clue at the time. And they explained to me that United States of America has a foreign cadet program where Turkey sends prospects, candidates to be admitted to West Point. So each high school, we had three military high schools, they would compete to get a seat at West Point, and I was being asked if I would be presenting Maltepe Military High School in this endeavor. And I said, yes, why not? And I started teaching myself better English, getting ready for SAT and all that. And that's how my West Point years actually started. So I got accepted in 1993. I flew to West Point, United States. And again, it was such a privilege for me to become one of the prospect graduates of Turkish Armed Forces who are, from West Point. In total, we have 15 USME graduates in Turkish Armed Forces. And I will explain later, none of them are in service as of today. But at West Point, I started my studies. Again, this was another big move in my life. And I can honestly state that one of the most influential institutions has been West Point. My West Point years has been very important for me. I started with Middle Eastern Studies, and then I actually started with nuclear engineering as my major. I was an idealist young Turkish military cadet, and I wanted to do what's good in future. One area that I thought I could be useful to Turkey was having some, knowledge and insight into nuclear engineering. Being where it is, Turkey geopolitically surrounded by all those, Russia, so it made sense for me to try to learn more on this area, which is actually was quite novel for Turkey at that time. But then I learned that I could add another major, and I decided to study Middle Eastern Studies again, purely because of what I was hoping to have a career, the type of career I wanted to have in the Turkish Armed Forces. Again, Middle East being a great part of what Turkey's struggles are about. So I started those studies. I had a chance to go to Tunisia for my academic studies. I had a chance to visit Europe. So this was the time period where I actually was now opening up to world more and more. So starting from Elazığ, Central Eastern Turkey, to Izmir, and now West Point. This is what I put down at my West Point howitzer. The year 1997 marks the end of my 4-year ordeal at West Point, a place where pure survival gives the joy of a remarkable feat, but it also marks the beginning of a lifetime service to my nation. Because of West Point, I feel better prepared for what's ahead of me. Finally, I do not know how to express my gratitude to my family and friends for all their support. So that was my West Point years. Again, it was a fascinating 4-year journey to Western thought and culture, especially all the political thought courses, the philosophy courses, logic, sociology, military sociology. So I did get a great education at military high school at Maltepe, but still it was a bit different. Even though Turkey was an aspiring democracy at those days, and we were very, open to Western ideas and all, because of the great work of Ataturk. Um, I was just sensing something different here. It was just way open, way flexible than I thought it. What I was reading about in my high school years. So it really shaped my thinking, what democracy means, what military means in a democracy, what is rule of law, why they're important, checks and balances. So the law courses that I have taken, the constitutional law, it was just fascinating for me. And I can truly say that it shaped who I am today, my West Point years. And as I said, unfortunately, 15 graduates, and none of them are right now in service in Turkish Armed Forces for understandable reasons. Some are in prison as we speak. Some are still in exile, living, outside of Turkey. A very few number is still living in Turkey, but that's where we all West Pointers ended up. So that's. By the way, I made the Turkish national newspaper. Hürriyet is the most influential newspaper. As I graduated, they came over to my graduation to took pictures and all, and they made a news article about me at that time, which was again, something I could never think about. Then I started my career in the Turkish Armed Forces. So starting as a platoon leader, working all the way up to regiment. I commanded battalion, an infantry battalion. I was admitted to Army War College. And then I had a chance to work in strategic headquarters of Turkish Armed Forces, first in the Turkish Land Forces. After I graduated from my Naval Postgraduate School studies, I got my master's degree. I was assigned to Turkish Land Forces. I attended meetings with European countries. I represented Turkish Land Forces at that capacity as a, second. I was a lieutenant, actually. It was a very early rank for me. But then I had another chance to work at Turkish General Staff, now as a military aide to the Deputy Chief of Turkish General Staff. Again, another very prestigious 2 years in my career as a captain. And so I had a chance early on to really try to do as much as I can in my career, which I loved so much. Then came my years at NATO headquarters. In 2015, I was admitted, I'm sorry, I was selected to a position at NATO headquarters in Brussels at the Operations Division of International Military Staff. So my duties included leading the NATO support to African Union as the liaison officer of the Ops Division. And I visited Ethiopia, the African Union. We had talks with them. We were trying, in my capacity as the lead, we were trying to build their logistics capacities at the time. It was a fascinating experience for me, not just working at NATO, but also working in the relationships of NATO with another international organization like African Union. That was such a huge deal for me personally to learn from. And then my second duty was about counterterrorism. I was the expert on counterterrorism for Ops Division. I participated in any NATO events that involved counterterrorism. And it's just sad that after this role, I was charged with my own government with something to do with this terminology. So it was just so sad. And then my final job was NATO doctrines. Again, I was working on that capacity. So you have multiple different jobs at NATO. Mine was I was working as a NATO officer. I was not working as a Turkish Army officer, serving for Turkey's interests, but I was a NATO officer in that international military staff position. And in a nutshell, my background, again, here's my educational background. I got my PhD at UNT. We're going to talk about that, of course. Professionally, again, I had a lot of, fantastic opportunities to grow. But what how I can describe all of that is my commitment to democracy and military professionalism. So I was, in 2016, I was a colonel committed to democracy and ready to serve anywhere around the globe, not just for Turkey's interests, but also the alliance interests, NATO's interests as well. But then, of course, the coup attempt happened. It was July 15, 2016. It was an evening, nice evening in Brussels. It was a regular day for me. I went to work in the morning, came back in the evening. We were having dinner with my family, and I just received a phone call from a friend from Brussels, another military officer. He just told me, turn on the TV. I said, why? He said, turn on the TV. And there were just unexplained military activities happening at that moment. It was about 9:30 in Turkey at the time, I believe 7:30 in Brussels. We were seeing, as you can see in this picture, some military personnel closing one side, only one side of the bridge in Istanbul. As you can see, traffic is still moving on the other side, but they're, military personnel here. And then we heard the prime minister that there's a coup attempt by a small group. And that was a huge shock. I was then, until early in the morning, I spent all night trying to sort out what's happening. Again, I was trying to understand, trying to see, trying to learn as much as I can. So one of the things that I did, I called two of my friends, and one of them told me that they were given an alarm for terror attack. So in military setting, when there is a possible terror attack, you would give an alarm to whole units. So people would rush to the barracks, and then there are specific duties that you need to do. You need to protect and defend the barracks, the conscripts, the personnel, the equipment. So that's what he told me. And a second one told me again, he didn't know a lot, but people were ordered to barracks and he didn't know why. That was all I could get from my contacts that night. Everything else was just what I heard from the TV as it was being broadcast. Then during midnight, we heard Erdogan, the president, speak to the public, and he encouraged people to, take up the streets and push back. And that's what people did. This is the picture from the bridge, again, from Istanbul. And pretty much that was the turning point of that night. In the meantime, of course, there has been some military activities that were being reported, planes, helicopters flying. And then came the speech again by Erdogan as the gift of God. So this was an event for him, which he described as gift of God. And we were to understand why he used that terminology later on. By dawn, again, Erdogan was, triumphant, and they revealed the foe as being, a certain faith-based group in Turkey behind the coup attempt. There were people who were dead. They were called martyrs, of course, by the Turkish government. 251, to be exact, is the official number. But again, there are a lot of reports that are coming out lately that are actually challenging these numbers here. Some of these folks were actually maybe was killed with some other impact and events related to the failed coup attempt. Again, I don't know. I'm in no position to know the details of it, but I'm just, observing what's coming out, of course. Then we started hearing about the mass purges in judiciary just that night, the night of the, coup attempt. The first thing that we heard was over 4,000, I believe, judges and attorneys were relieved of duty. And then mass arrests within military started right away as well. And unfortunately, we started to see the first signs of torture the same night. And these were being broadcasted easily. They had no fear at all. So they actually wanted to, I guess, show people that they are in charge, the coup is defeated, and they wanted to make sure that no one in their right mind is going to attempt anything further if this was a genuine attempt. And then, as I mentioned, the purge began. These are the numbers that I've shared with you, and it was a very abrupt change. It was a very sudden change in the makeup of the Turkish armed forces, but also the civilian bureaucracy. It was pretty much, a lot of people are arguing that if you were a person who would oppose the agenda of the regime at that time, and you were targeted. So, but again, I'm in no position to verify of any one of those claims, but you will find a lot of discussion on that. So personally, again, what's my verdict of what happened in 2016, 15 July? I'm in no position to give a full verdict on that, but I've been reading up on it since then, and I've been trying to understand the events of the night. But I think what comes to very close to what I think is what Henry Barkey recently shared in an interview. If I may read it, so he says, by the way, he's a very well-known Turkey expert from Lehigh University. He has been serving in a lot of DC think tanks over the years as well. So he says, to me, it seems to be a bizarre coup. The Turkish military knows how to execute a coup. And this is very, very correct. So unfortunately, Turkey has a history of coups. So no one in their right mind would send tanks down to the Bosphorus Bridge at 9 p.m. on Friday while it is jammed with cars and streets are full of people. I was not in Turkey during the 1980 coup, but I still remember the coup in 1960 when I was a kid and the coup in 1971. We all know how soldiers plot a coup in Turkey. The July 15 coup attempt was strange. According to one speculation, the plotters were going to start the coup in the late hours, but were forced to execute earlier because their plot has been denounced and discovered. However, we do not know, even if this speculation is true. Turkey so far has not conducted any fair investigation of the coup attempt. The government accused and purged large numbers of people. As Erdogan said, it was a gift from God. He exploited the coup to purge the civilian and military bureaucracy. I do not know if the government got prior information on the coup. My colleagues who also study Turkey admit that they have no reliable information about the attempt. I hope one day we will learn more when various archives are open to the public. So that was his views. So at the end, I was extremely upset and ashamed for my country. Again, believing in democracy, rule of law, and freedoms to my core, I just couldn't comprehend what was happening. Even if I had very opposing views to what the current regime was doing since 2013 after the corruption cases. Still, this was a military coup in a democracy. You just oppose it. That's simple as that. But then I was also seeing the footsteps of extreme measures coming. And of course, a lot of friends and families that we were very close got hurt and got hurt really badly. But overall, I also had to think about myself and my family. What did all this mean for me and my family? So on Monday, I went to work as normal. And again, I was working in international military staff. I had a German colonel as my branch chief. He saw me first in the morning and he was just shocked as I was. And he just kept asking what just happened. And I said, I don't know. I really do not know. And he was very smart guy, and he knew what was coming, and he asked me if I was safe. I said I don't know. I had really no idea. My American friends, again in ops division, my British, Spanish, so everyone was trying to understand what was going on. It was a huge shock to NATO as well. And these are people who are being accused by the regime, by the way, being after the coup attempt. But anyhow, there was silence and fear in the Turkish ranks. So it was hard for us to even talk about what just happened. And it was hard for me to reach out to a lot of friends in Turkey. Was I going to hurt them if I reach out? So it was a big weight, and unfortunately, the news were not good. Mass arrests and disturbing images continued, and the society was actually mobilized for quite a bit of time. They were called for democracy meetings during the evenings, and they would come up and show their support for the Turkish democracy. I truly believe in their sincerity, and I really hope that they were correct, but I really do have my doubts on that. So right after the coup attempt was defeated, the state of emergency was declared in a couple days, and the 2 years long of rule by emergency decrees started. This just gave the power to Erdogan to essentially deal with the situation however he wanted to deal with. And they started reaching out to overseas military personnel as well. So we started hearing news about people being summoned from attaché positions or some other NATO positions. And as I was continuing my life in Brussels, we would normally go to Turkish markets for our grocery needs and all. And we started seeing interesting, strange signs put up at the doors of the Brussels Turkish markets, calling after some specific faith group, the Gülen movement followers, not being allowed into the markets, or they knew that I was working in the NATO as a Turkish Army officer, so I would get some conspicuous looks and some slurs sometimes. So it was getting touchy. And again, some people who were summoned back to Turkey, we started to hear that they were actually getting arrested at the airports. So it was a anxiously waiting time for me and my family. And in the meantime, one of the people that I know closely was the military attaché of Brussels, a colonel that I personally have worked with him. And he was summoned, and after that order, actually, he received a very strange visit to his home in Brussels. The embassy personnel tried to, well, I just cannot put it any other way. They tried to raid his home. How could you do that? On what judicial capacity? It just beats me this day as well. But that's what they did, and they tried to forcefully enter his home. So things were escalating. Things were escalating, and then one day the phone rang, and I was told that they have received orders that relieve me of duty as well, and demanding that I return to Turkey in 3 days. Now, I want you to understand. I want to explain something, because these assignments, NATO assignments, are called permanent assignments, and they're for 3 years or 4 years. These are assignments where you bring all your family, all your house. So you have rent, you have cars, car insurance. So there's no way that this is not a temporary assignment. There's no way that you're turning in 3 days to back to Turkey from that kind of assignment. They knew it, but still, that was the order I was given, to be back in Turkey in 3 days. So the first thing that I did was appeal for that decision. I filed an appeal petition, and I informed my superiors at NATO, at IMS, that I was being relieved of duty. And we were being rushed. We were being rushed to leave our badge, leave our office at NATO. And I insisted that no, this is not the way. I'm a Turkish army officer. I'm a Turkish Army Colonel, and I'm not gonna leave my duty, my post, without properly transitioning to someone else. So these are important duties for the alliance, and I just wanted to make sure that I was doing my best to be able to at least, um, do the orderly transition of my duties. And then I started the visits and farewells. That was also not welcome by my Turkish superiors. But hey, I went up to my division head. I went up to the three-star general at the International Military Staff. I explained the situation to myself, and I got very warm. I heard very warm words from them. This was for me the way to start to resist the situation that I was put in. And I saw a lot of warm support from all of my NATO colleagues and superiors during that time. They were just because they knew me. They knew my potential, where I come from, my quality of work. They knew who, at that time, Colonel Çevik Parmak was, or what I meant to them, and they just stick with what they knew, not what they were being told suddenly with my, unfortunately, own country. So we started within the family what to do. Now I was out, and so we decided that freedom and unity at all costs is going to be our decision. We had to remain away for a while. And should we do that here in Belgium at that time or somewhere else? That was a big decision. And since what has been happening in Belgium since the coup attempt, there's a huge Turkish community. And because of my background in the United States, being a West Point graduate, being a naval postgraduate graduate, it was just more meaningful for us to actually start our lives in United States. So we made the decision to move to United States. And it took about 40 days after I received the orders. It took about 40 days for us to make the arrangements and move to United States. We first started selling what we owned, what we brought to Brussels. This is us at Shape trying to gain some, because financially it was a very dark moment, unfortunately. By the way, this is yet another picture. This is from our home in Brussels. After we were purged and we decided to move, we even had to, bring all the change in the house and see how much we can come up with. We were really in not a good financial situation, honestly. So after all that process, we were able to gather couple $1,000s. That was all we could manage to have to move to United States after buying our tickets. So we bought our tickets and flew to Dallas Fort Worth. So that was it. That was my Brussels years, my NATO years, my Army years were over. And now we were forced to start new in Dallas Fort Worth. Why Dallas Fort Worth? I came there because from Army College, I had a very good colleague, a friend, Dr. Çelebi. He was getting his PhD at the University of North Texas in Dallas Fort Worth. So we reached out to him. He reached out to us. So it was me, my family, and two other military officers from Brussels, from NATO. Shaban, he's a supply chain professor now as well, Shaban Adana and Hasan Çelik, another supply chain professor. You're going to see their pictures in coming slides. So three families, we moved to Dallas Fort Worth from Brussels. And my colleague, Mehmet Çelebi, was classmates with Shaban and Hassan, so they were very close. So that's why we chose to take our first steps in United States in Dallas Fort Worth. Well, it's funny. My wife thought that since I'm a West Point graduate, I'm an MPS graduate, we would just move down to United States, and Sadat, his husband, would just apply to jobs, and companies are willing and waiting for him, and he would just get a job, and we would just start over that way. But that's not what happened. And actually, I went along with my two younger friends, military officers, Hassan and Çelik. They thought, hey, if we're forced to have a leave by the government, if you have a forced leave by the government, why not just turn that opportunity to a PhD? And so they were already thinking about applying to PhD programs, and it was a good plan. I liked it, and I went along with that plan. So to the detriment of my wife's ideas, but hey. And then, I'm sorry. So of course, I had to make a living. So one of the first things that I could do very quickly was, since I had a social security card from West Point years, I could participate in ride sharing. So Uber, Lyft. It was such a big day for me to be able to again earn some money for my family. So I applied and I got my transportation for hire vehicle permit, and then started driving. I was very shy at first. But then, of course, there's no way that you can escape from what you're living. And then I started thinking, hey, why not take this opportunity to tell people what is happening or what has happened in Turkey. So I had possibly more than 1,000 customers, and I'm still in touch with some of them. And I had a chance to share, what I've been through with them, and it was maybe a therapy for me as well to be able to speak about, what was happening. And then I started my applications right away. So I had to be able to stay here. I had to apply for asylum. Since I was being persecuted in my motherland, I had the grounds for asylum, so I made that application. And I also made multiple PhD applications. And driving Uber for Uber, Lyft is good, but it takes a toll on your body. I had to do something more, and I had a family of four. So I thought maybe I could start selling things, and I reached out to one of the flea markets in the area and tried to learn if I can, buy things and sell things there. And that's how we started with my wife and myself and my kids as well. They participated in this, a modest resale liquidation business in 2017. And we learned as we go. So we started buying some electronics and just going to the flea market on Saturdays, Sundays. This is pretty much how we started, as small of a number of goods as you can see. And then we learned how the flea market operates. There was actually another area where people were buying more from within the flea market, the overflow area, where you don't have these nice, covered. It's just a parking lot, but people think that they will get a better deal in that specific area, so they would rush to that space first. So we started selling in that space after learning that. But learning as you go, being under the Texas sun for almost 6 to 8 hours, or sometimes 10 hours. This is my wife getting some yogurt to my face after having all that sunburn. But we learned quickly. So we started to invest into our equipment, bought some tents, reached out to some further places where we can buy liquidation items. So we started to grow our business. Of course, we needed a bigger transport. I bought a Sienna, you cannot believe how much this vehicle can hold when you bring all the seats down. So we would just put everything here to the Sienna and then drive to the flea market during the Sunday or Saturday and try to make a living. And then we started to also learn about how we can manage online selling platforms. And in the meantime, I started to get my PhD application responses. I got admitted to 3 separate programs, one being the logistics program of the UNT and the 2 other being the international relations from UNT and UTD. But we went with the UNT program. Dr. Randall, another veteran, he's a veteran of Air Force, United States Air Force. He was the chair of the department at that time. To this day, I'm grateful for his belief in us. So we had a brief meeting with him. Dr. Chelebi, my host, arranged that meeting, and we told our story, me, Hassan, and Shaban, and we were qualified, but also it was very, very important for us that he really saw the potential in us and admitted us into the logistics PhD program at UNT. So I started my program at August of 2017. So now my program looks something like this. During the weekends, I would go to the flea market, trying again to make a living. And then I would go out to ride sharing, to Uber Lyft some nights. And then the rest is the PhD coursework. This is me at the flea market, trying to read some, academic articles and getting ready for the coursework as I'm waiting for, customers to show up to buy things that I was selling. So the business grew. We started buying more goods. We had a very diverse portfolio after 3 years. And also the academic work, the PhD work was evolving, very good. We started attending conferences this is Shaban, this is Hassan, by the way. We at different conferences, and it was all good in terms of our integration and our rebuilding our lives. But what was lacking was Turkey, and what was happening there, and what kept happening there since the failed coup attempt. At the heart of it, there was one constant remained in our lives, and it was Turkey and how our friends and families were being treated in Turkey. So at that front, at Turkey front, on November 23rd, about 13 days after I came to the United States, I was officially purged by an emergency decree. So that was the end of my career in the Turkish Armed Forces. And I filed a suit, of course, but lost. And then they created a constitutional commission to correct the wrongdoings for the purge process. And I applied to that commission as well. And again, I was declined a positive answer. And it was interesting that the commission cited that my name, the plaintiff's name, was on the short list for the military aid, a colonel position, to the president of Turkey. So they found in a drawer in Turkish General Staff headquarters a list, an official list, a candidate list, where they were considering who they would want to make or assign to the military aid position for the upcoming year for the president of Turkey. And my name was on there, which is normally a very prestigious job. And this is something that I would always be, proud about. But my name being on that list was now being shown to me as a sign of me being unfaithful somehow or in some capacity to my country. And so it was declined. It was declined. So my PhD studies continued. This is our whiteboard in the office at UNT. This is where we had our ideas put on board. Pretty much all of our dissertations are a product of this board here. This one that you're seeing is Hassan's, dissertation. So we were doing pretty good. I was doing pretty good. The program was going really well. After 2 years, I was done with my coursework, and then I already started with my dissertation early on. So I reached out to my professors at the program, and I asked their their opinions about graduating early. So because if I could graduate early in 3 years, then it was just going to be a fabulous way for me to start supporting my family by doing a regular work than what I was doing to that point. So they agreed. So since we were quite successful with the program, they agreed and opened the way for us for me to graduate in 3 years, and I took that opportunity. So I continued my dissertation. I started applications, and then I had campus visits. I again attended multiple other conferences. This was my campus visit to Stidel. I was really excited about this. Stidel being a military institution, and me coming from West Point and coming from a Turkish Armed Forces background, and the opportunity to be able to serve there was great. But unfortunately, they went with another great candidate. But I was excited with the Citadel. Since my career in the military was taken away from me, of course, you can understand my urge for that Citadel position. And then I added yet another way of making a living. I started soccer refereeing at that 2019 and 20, I believe. So that was yet another attempt to provide for the family. So that was on my front. So that's what I've experienced since I flew to United States in 2016 November. But how about my kids and my family? So for my kids, it was very hard on them. We went to Brussels in 2015. They started a French school, and they spent a year there, and then we had to take them from the French school after the Purge, and now we were here in the United States, and they had to learn English. So it was a huge challenge for them. But more importantly, whatever they knew of me as their father and us as a family have been shattered. From a military diplomat at NATO headquarters in Brussels to an alleged whatever in the eye of the motherland, and then a migrant Uber driver and a flea market seller, and then yet still and also a PhD candidate. It was just too much for them to bear, but they've done quite well. This is my my daughter's high school ceremony where she was selected to honor society. This is my son, Burak. He always wanted to follow with his father's footstep to a military career. His plan was, after Brussels assignment, the 3 years in Brussels, he was hoping to, when we get back to Turkey, he was hoping to join the Turkish Armed Forces. But unfortunately, his dream was taken away from him. He, being an American citizen, he was born here when I was getting my master's degree at Naval Postgraduate School. So he was born in Monterey, California. He was a U.S. citizen. Me and my wife, we always thought of the opportunity, a prospect for him to maybe do something here in the United States, even before the coup attempt. It's interesting that we had those conversations, but it actually became real. So we opened that opportunity to him. We told to him, and he told him that he has nothing to be worrying about or feeling bad about. If this is what you want to do with your life, if military career is what you like, go ahead and do it. And so he started the junior ROTC program at the high school. This is our garage, by the way. You can see all the items that are being ready to be sold, and he is just entering from his ROTC program from high school. And again, they're getting ready for SAT. Dr. Shaban is helping them out. So they've done quite well, I believe. They're the real true survivors of this process. And I think it was 2018, we all thought as a family it would be nice for us to have a cat. And we adopted a cat, and it was just such a joyful moment for all of us. And I asked my kids to give him a name. It was he. And I still, to this day, cannot forget their answer. After some discussion, Brock and Ajay came up with a name, Justice, as the name for our cat. But unfortunately, Justice was lost in a month or so during a storm, a heavy storm. I don't know if it was just for us what's happening in Turkey and Justice being lost as well. We spent like weeks looking for him, but he was gone, and Justice was gone from our lives at that moment as well. But anyhow, things were going well, so I was ready to defend my dissertation, and I accepted the offer from the Sales University. To this day, I'm very grateful for that offer. And so I defended my dissertation. It was COVID times, by the way, so I had to do my dissertation defense in my bedroom. And my dissertation topics were about risk propensity, transaction cost economics, neutrality assumption, essentially in 3 papers. What I tried to do, I always had I believe, a theoretical mind. I always was fascinated with grand theories. So with economics, transaction cost economics is, and of course with business, a huge and impactful theory. And I was very impressed to see that risk neutrality was one of the main cornerstones of this grand theory. And learning about how neuroscience was actually proving how risk propensity is influential in our lives. I just wanted to work this topic. I just wanted to understand how risk propensities of managers might actually influence contract design and selection process through the transaction cost economics lens. And that's what I've done with the first paper. I created the instruments that to be used in measuring what I was trying to measure, and second and third papers, that's exactly what I did. And it was a successful dissertation, and then came the move to Pennsylvania. So our time at Texas was over in 2020, August. We moved to Pennsylvania. I assumed the role of chair and assistant professor of supply chain management. For my wife, after all that loss, now we got our lives back. That's how she perceived it. So she was the silent hero of all this process. For me to be able to finish my PhD in 3 years, without her, it wouldn't be possible. After a while, she took on all of the liquidation business. I was just going to the flea markets during the weekends and just doing the purchases, but she pretty much, provided for the whole family. Then I arrived to the Sales University campus, to my office. I brought all my trinkets. Remember, we just brought 3 suitcases from Brussels to here, but I brought my West Point goodies, and it was a very nice feeling to have an office and to be able to again reclaim what has been taken from you. Again, it's very materialistic in a way, but it's also very spiritualistic. It's to this day, I'm really having a hard time to describe what I felt. to be able to start my job as the chair and assistant professor of supply chain management. And so academically, in my 5 years at the sales, um, I doubled the program of supply chain management at the sales. I was able to begin an Excel certification program, which was a quite success for our students. I published 7 articles in 5 years, five being in A-level journals. I organized field trips for our students for their experiential learning. So it was a very rewarding 5 years for me. And after 5 years, this August, I am going to be joining the Florida Gulf Coast University as an assistant professor of supply chain management to become an associate professor of supply chain management, hopefully in a year. So that's my story. And for the family, my son, Brock, he again, as I said, went to ROTC. After graduation, he accepted a position at JB Hunt. He's now working as a manager trainee at JB Hunt in a logistics facility. And he's also a National Guard. So he was selected to National Guard. He is becoming a signal officer at the Harrisburg Division of Pennsylvania. So I'm very proud of what he has achieved. My daughter, she is a criminal justice major. She's graduating this May from the Sales University, and she's an aspiring law school student. So she wants to take a gap year and then study for LSAT and hopefully get into a DC law school coming year in 2026. Again, the process shaped her decisions quite a bit, I can say. And my wife, again, she is the real hero in this story. After all that work with the liquidation business, last year or year and a half ago, she started a cybersecurity bootcamp program, and she upskilled herself. And now she's been working in a cybersecurity analyst position at Sentinel for about a year. And so that's what she has been doing lately. This is my wife just showcasing one of the latest certification she has achieved to get. This was us, but sadly, in the meanwhile, in Turkey, it was a huge decline in all metrics. What you're seeing right now is the corruption index. And as you can see from 2013, please pay attention to what's happening from 2013 to these days. There's a huge decline in the corruption index. This is published by Transparency International. Freedom House, the freedom scorecard of Turkey, unfortunately, is still not free to this day. As you can see, the scores for global freedom and internet freedom. The rule of law index, again, a huge decline since 2010, 11, 13, a huge decline in that index as well. Economics is another decline area. Travel, people are having really hard time to be able to even go to academic meetings outside of Turkey because it's just they're not able to get visas for those kinds of events either sometimes. So it's really hard. What's happening in Turkey is unfortunately so disheartening. And in the final couple years, there has been some very important developments in terms of European Union Human Rights Court, EU HRC, and UN Human Rights Council. What you're seeing here is the number of cases that are waiting from Turkey at EU HRC. It's almost like more than double than what Russia has. So this is unfortunately a very sad situation, for my homeland. And very recently, the UN Human Rights Council came up with a very interesting decision about Akın Öztürk, General Akın Öztürk. He is an Air Force general. He was portrayed and convicted as the number one of the coup attempt. So let me say that again. He was, according to the Turkish courts, he was the mastermind. He was the number one of the coup attempt in 15 July. And this UN Human Rights Council looked into his case, and he was essentially, it was a very detailed, as far as I can understand, it was a very detailed report of work and look into the conditions of what he has done that night, how he was treated afterwards. So pretty much on all accounts, Akın Öztürk was deemed to be unlawfully impacted by the court's decisions, and the UN Human Rights Council called Turkey to take these considerations into take these ruling into consideration. So that was in a nutshell what happened. But then after 2020, after I got my first job as a full-time faculty, I started thinking what I can do more. In those 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, as we were growing our business, we were also trying to help people in Turkey as well. I debated this a lot, but I would like to tell this story. My wife would designate some certain days as Turkey days, and she would just promise or devote all the revenue for that day to go to people who are in need in Turkey. And interestingly, all of those other days and that day, she would have the most sales, and whatever the revenue was for those days, she would just give that back to people who are in need. So we could do that, right? That was easy, but I had to do something more. My upbringing, my education, so I was always looking for opportunities on how to actually do something more meaningful. It was for me the time to give back. And as I met with people in the United States, my former Turkish colleagues, and heard their stories, one thing was very, interesting. We all had huge support from our NATO colleagues and friends. There was a huge touch to our lives in terms of veteran support. So we started discussing what we can do in this regard. The first thoughts of Navi then have been around, and we wanted to do something not just as Turkish veterans, but as NATO veterans. So we looked up the concept of NATO veterans, and we saw that there's actually a gap in this regard. There's a NATO veterans organization in Canada, which is essentially just primarily Canadian. It only serves to those military Canadian officers who served at NATO. But what we had in mind was more broad. We wanted to come up with a platform which we can actually protect what matters most, democracy, rule of law, and liberties, but also create some networking opportunities along the way as well. So that's how NATO Veterans Initiative started. The first ideas were, again, in 2020. And we started with a LinkedIn page. The way we defined a NATO veteran was anyone, any individual, any military officer or NCO who has professionally served in the armed forces of a NATO country was a NATO veteran. So that's how we defined it. And we created a LinkedIn page, and we wanted to grow this as a grassroots movement, a grassroots platform. So we started sharing this idea with fellow NATO countries. I reached out to my West Point classmates. Shaban has done the same. So we reached out to our former superiors from NATO jobs, and we shared this idea. And there was huge welcoming feeling about this idea. There was an enthusiasm and interest, and so the organization, which can actually create valuable networking, empowerment, and solidarity opportunities for all veterans of NATO countries, and also be a valuable asset to uphold the principles of NATO, which is actually enshrined in the NATO treaty, the democracy, rule of law, and liberties or freedoms. So those were the two missions that we came up with. And we drafted a white paper. I'm proud to say that I was the first to draft it and then shared with my colleagues. And so this was our manifest as NATO Veterans Initiative. But again, we opened this up to views. So we have received a lot of great feedback from our European American military veterans, and we finalized it and when we published it. And then some content started to be created. And as we started to create some content, we came up with the NATO Veterans Org website, and it became a great milestone to NAVI, NATO Veterans Initiative. And it was time for us, after 3 years of getting ready to become an official organization. Now we were ready, and we got incorporated as of June 13th, 2023 in Washington, D.C. And we were granted by IRS a tax waiver. So we're a public charity right now. And again, what we're trying to achieve is, as former military personnel who have served shoulder to shoulder in defense of NATO's core principles, we aim to establish a robust network of NATO veterans, fostering transatlantic relations and advocating for the fundamental values that underpin the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So one of the first things that we did after I got elected as the chairman of the board, one of the first things we did was creating NATO NAVI Research Institute. So we wanted to have a robust research department and institute where we are committed to providing transatlantic leaders and societies with a unique perspective on peace and security, anchored in NATO's founding principles of rule of law, democracy, human rights, and individual liberties. And we wanted to, again, serve as a platform that empowers NATO veterans to voice their educated perspectives and opinions, and enforcing NATO's commitment to its core principles. One of the first events that we did was with a Belgian former Prime Minister, Professor Mark Akins. We talked NATO about migration. So we started officially the events as NAVI Research Institute. So we also started a NAVI Radar Weekly. This is a weekly newsletter that comes out on LinkedIn and also to your emails if you subscribe. So essentially just a summary of important events for that week through the lenses of NATO Veterans Initiative. Last year, it was the 75th year of NATO, and we organized a webinar with the former Director General of International Military Staff, a German 3-star general, and a Turkish general. Again, another general was purged in the aftermath of the coup attempt. And they came together and discussed NATO's past, today, and future. And we have been doing some webinars with some esteemed academics and think tank experts. This is Dr. Svetoslana, this is Elizabeth Braw, and we had a very interesting session with Michael Banamau, who is leading an effort to Europeanize NATO. So we've been quite active in the past year. So for future, we have some programs and projects. We have partnered with Veteran Coalition International. This is a DC-based and Denmark-supported organization, which we share a lot together, and we have applied to NATO grants together. We're still waiting a response. We've been working with them for about 2 months now. We have a NATO Veterans Survey project. We're hoping to one day achieve a NATO Veterans Day inception across NATO countries, starting with US. So a lot of good projects are still being worked on. So in terms of my final words, what I want to leave you with is that, again, what I went through is, to me, it's not that special. I just don't feel it that way, right? As I mentioned, it's just another major life event. And I was at a place where I suffered the least. So I was lucky that me and my family was not in Turkey at the moment. But I was able to, in a nutshell, tell you what we went through in that process. Now, think about what happened to people who were in Turkey, and still what they're experiencing, the silence that they're being left with. But after all that, what I can say is that what matters most is the freedom. It's essential for our life as we know it. Without it, it just doesn't work. And it was very interesting to see the strength in myself to take adversity against me, my name, my career, and actually build a more strongful and more strength out of it. A career that is now flourishing as an academic here in the United States, and also as a leader of an international nonprofit organization. So your education and upbringing and your core values are paramount in terms of importance to be able to succeed in such a sudden change in life. And resilience comes out of all that as well. And the ability to unite against what's coming was our strength as family. And I'm hopeful that Turkey will soon emerge from this storm. I'm truly hopeful, and I'm praying every day, and it's going to hopefully reclaim its path to democracy, justice, and freedom soon. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to my and my family's story. I know it was long. I truly apologize, but I'm open for any questions that you might have.
I think we might have a few questions. There were a couple that came up as we were going. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So thank you so very much for sharing this story. It's a touching story, I think, and it's unfortunate that it's not a story, or that it is a story that you share with so many thousands of people from your country. And one question I have to you, I come from Germany, and there are so many refugees from the Turkish intelligentsia who obviously would make such a huge difference in, the economy of the country. Now we benefit from their skills just like this country benefits from yours. But I had a couple of questions concerning, one was the word, you used the word ordeal when you described your time at West Point, and I was just wondering, what do you mean by that? It has a slightly, painful undertone, but I just wondered whether that was intentional. The other question is, what in your view has this experience of the coup in Turkey done to NATO? Because, NATO is supposed to be bound together by these values. And, everyone looks at Turkey, and it's pretty glaringly obvious that these values are not being upheld. Nevertheless, the NATO connection continues. Has there been a break? What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you for that. I really appreciate two great questions. Now, to your first question, I used the ordeal intentionally because I was a very particular person. As a child, I was so shy. I just couldn't. I was not. I was not antisocial, but it was just so hard for me to open up to people. I always have thoughts in my mind. I would love to read. I was just people would always ask me, "What are you thinking?" So whenever they would look at me, at my face, and they would just inadvertently, "What are you thinking right now?" So that's how I was. So starting from Elazığ to Izmir and to West Point, it was really a huge step for me. So I cannot I cannot stress how big of a change it was for me to be able to come to West Point and actually thrive there. It was a huge ordeal in that regard, and I'm still to this day thankful that I had made that decision. It was a huge step for me, but I was always a skeptic of myself. And can I really do this? Can I really succeed in such an environment? So it has been a huge challenge to what I was. And when I come out of West Point, it was when I said it really changed me. It really did change me. So and it's still a process, still ongoing. I'm still trying to open up. I had the similar feelings when I first started teaching at the sales. It was hard for me to again open up, connect, but just in time, I'm hoping it's getting better. To your second question, if I understood it correctly, you wanted to explore the effects of the coup attempt to NATO. Um, you might remember in the first months some announcements from some higher up, NATO generals that NATO was actually being impacted by what was happening in Turkey. Because when you just order pretty much all of your, I think it was like maybe 2/3 of all NATO personnel, Turkish personnel who was at NATO positions at that moment were ordered back, summoned back. So you're just leaving all those posts blank immediately, and that's huge. So and you do not have, unfortunately, a plan that you can offer to NATO as well. So they just at that time it was a hysteria, and they just wanted to take control of what was going on. But then, of course, they started sending replacements. And again, these are great people, great, officers. I have nothing against them. They were my colleagues at the time. But unfortunately, there was a reason that I was there, then they were not. Because you get selected to those posts, and them being not as ready as I was, and taking up my post, the job that they could produce in the initial months, I'm sure they got better in time, but it was just a huge change. And I was hearing these kind of things from my NATO colleagues, from not Turkish, but of course from other nations colleagues, how different the quality was of the new personnel coming into those jobs. So in that regard, NATO was affected immediately, and in the midterm as well. But overall, the most important part for NATO is Turkey is the southern flank of NATO, and it's just impossible for NATO to overlook what's happening in Turkey. And even though what was happening was diminishing NATO's strength, they just had to go with it and just wait, and until the Turkish armed forces was still up to task. And how far we've gone in that regard, it's not for me to tell. I just really cannot. I do have my opinion on that, of course, and I do observe things coming out of Turkish armed forces, in the news media outlets, but it's just really hard to gauge at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You just hold it. And I'm sure this is a tough question for you, but, you know, and I'm sure you've looked back on this whole thing and it's like, you were just in the right place at the right time at that particular time. If you hadn't have been at NATO, you know, what the consequences were. But sort of the overall thing to us is that the whole coup, how many was really in it? And was the whole thing a just made up thing to purge the country from whoever they didn't want to? What's your kind of after the fact evaluation?
Thank you for that question. Again, another great question. Even the day after, there has been these kinds of questions popping up. I remember then Vice President Biden giving out similar statements after visiting Turkey as show of support. And the history is not, we have seen a lot of similar events in history. So it's really not too hard for us to think about what might have happened if that was the case. And you might be familiar with a very recent TV show, Zero Day, and there's a very interesting line in that show. And so, how can you go such a great crisis to waste? Is at least what might have happened. So even if this was not all planned out, which I see there are signs to it, and I will mention some. Even if this was just a crisis that they found and then they exploited in the aftermath, it's really not easy to not think in those terms. Why am I saying this? What's my assessment? Again, I'm in no position to talk about definitively, but what I can tell from the numbers that I have seen after the coup attempt that was published by the Turkish General Staff. The Turkish General Staff declared that about 5,000 officers and NCOs participated in the events of that night in some capacity. Some were called to barracks as an alarm or whatever, but the purge numbers are more than 25,000, as I showed you. So, and if all of these people were actually would be, supporting such an attempt, why weren't they participating at that night and diminishing the force of the, such an attempt? So a lot of questions are being asked, and rightfully so. One other thing that really catches my eye, and this is my personal experience, when I was in Brussels, again, then the Turkish General Chief of Staff, General Akar, visited Brussels, and he summoned us. It was, I think, maybe May, during the spring of 2016, and he was very hard on the Turkish regime. He was openly critiquing Erdogan and what they were doing, and it was just so odd for me to hear those words from them. And I've learned from my friends in time that he has been that way for a couple of years. So again, a lot of the higher up generals were doing that, and maybe they were just instigating and prepping people for such an false flag operation. I wouldn't know. I don't know. But again, I have my doubts on that. Because right at the aftermath of the coup attempt, none of those people were punished for what happened. Because if you are in command of an armed force, you're responsible for everything that happens in that. And well, they kept their jobs. We were the ones who were purged, but they kept their jobs, and they kept increasing their position in the government. So to this day, I think we still have to wait a bit longer, but I believe it will come out. The truth will come out sometime, hopefully in the not too far future.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And those that couldn't join us and watch the recording are, I think, going to be disappointed they couldn't ask you questions. But we appreciate it. I will be very sad to see you leave to sales, but I know you're on to bigger and better things. But that's great. And please say hi to your son. He was one of my
Thank
students.
you.
And I'm glad he got into the Guard because I remember that battle that particular year that he was facing. So from a personal note, thank you so much, and we all appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time again. Appreciate it. Enjoy your rest of the day.